Thank you. Good evening. Being 7 o'clock, I'd like to call this meeting into session. This is the Wolfeboro ZBA for June 26th, 2023. Tonight, we have a continued hearing from our June 6th meeting for the Laconia Area Community Land Trust. I don't know if I have the case number here. I don't have an agenda in front of me. I just have the memorandum.
Case is 03 SE 23.
Yep.
I got it. Case 03 SE-23, Laconia Area Community Land Trust. So tonight we have a couple of things first before we get to the meat of the case. First of all, we have a short board tonight. We are missing our two alternates, and one of our regular members, Sarah Silk, recused herself last hearing. So we have a 4-member board. Typically, when this happens, we ask the applicant if they would like to be heard with a short board, or if they would like to wait until we have a full board at another time. But before I ask that question, I have a couple of questions for Tavis. Tavis, it seems like we agreed to renotice this meeting even though it wasn't required. Did that happen?
It wasn't renoticed, no.
It was not renoticed?
No, because the hearing was continued. There was no reason to renotice.
Right, but we discussed renoticing it so that more people
I discussed
would...
putting it back in the paper, but that ultimately wasn't done, correct?
Right, okay. I didn't think so. Okay, so I want to ask the applicant, do you want to be heard with a short board tonight? Would you mind putting it in the microphone so it goes on the record? That's okay. I don't think that's on, probably. Another hoop for you to jump through.
Is that better? Ooh.
Yes.
All right.
Much better.
Okay. So yes, my name is Megan Carrier from Sheehan Finney Bass and Green, so I'm representing the applicant. We're fine proceeding with a short board tonight. I'm assuming I had thought that Mr. Fordenberg had recused himself at the last meeting, and I was going to say that I think the basis was that you're also a member of the select board. Is that accurate? We have no problem with you participating in this. It's not something that we would raise as an error. So we're good with all 4 participating tonight.
That was only for the street light.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
right. I think Sarah had another reason why she recused herself for that.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We're happy to proceed. Thank you.
Thanks. While you're up there, so looking at your application, I noticed that one of the sections listed in the planner's report was not listed in your application, and that was the 17572J with regard to multifamily buildings. Can you tell me how that went about?
Yeah. So the ordinance is set up kind of interestingly, where 17572J permits multifamily dwellings in the village residential district by special exception. And then there are several avenues in the ordinance to sort of go about getting that special exception. So the one that the board had used in 2008 and 2009 when this was originally granted is Article 4A, and that allows the creation of affordable nonprofit workforce housing in the village residential district and the commercial to greater downtown area. So while that 17572J we didn't cite it initially just because we were viewing it as sort of the avenue that, the special exception was obtained through this Section 4A avenue. But if you go back and look at the minutes from the original approvals, it's very clear that they're talking about multifamily housing for this full parcel. So.
Well, I did go look at the minutes, and I could not shush that out. So maybe you could, well, in any case, the ordinance seems to have changed. so that the way to get to multifamilies is through the special exception in this district. Okay, rather than however it happened before, which
Yeah.
I kind of think it was a permitted use in the C1 district, and that's where it was at the C1 district before. Your application has actually the C1 district as the district this is in, which is incorrect.
Yeah, this is in the village residential district, and I apologize if there was an
Yep.
error on the application. So, I mean, with regard to the minutes from the previous meetings, or from the 2008 and 2009 approvals, if you were to look at the minutes, it sounds like you did look at the minutes, it's the discussion related to this parcel as a whole. So there were the three phases. There were the first two phases that were rental units, and the final phase that is for sale units. But the discussion related to this special exception, sort of to allow the multifamily housing covering the entire property. So in any event,
So I guess my understanding is that the special exception reached back then was to allow for the workforce housing, not necessarily in a particular form like multifamily, single-family, but the special exception was for the affordable workforce housing. I did not see any section that allowed a special exception for multifamily, which is why I'm assuming if it was in the C1 district, it was probably a permitted use, but I don't know that. So again, moving forward, whatever that case was, if you believe that it was permitted for some reason in Phase 3 back then in the minutes, I guess if you could clearly show that to us, because it wasn't clear to me.
Sure. I may invite Steve Dwyer up. He knows more about the history of the project than I do. I wasn't involved in those earlier phases. The one thing I will say is that either way, the special exception criteria are the same. The factors that you're evaluating are the same, whether we're talking about a special exception under 4A or a special exception for multifamily housing.
Yeah, I recognize that. However, none of your documents speak to the multifamily part of that as far as going through those criteria. So that would have to be a separate thread, separate application. The application would need to show that the special exception under the village residential is something that was considered with this application, because the application doesn't say that and the denial doesn't say that. So as you probably know, you take a course depending on the denial of an application, and that's just not in the paperwork at this time. So.
Do you know anything about the history?
Well, actually, the original approved plan for Phase 3 included duplexes. Although it was ownership, it wasn't single-family, 20 single-family homes, which was finally approved by the planning board in 2020. But if you go back to the drawings from 2008, 2009, Phase 3 was actually a majority duplexes,
That's
not
correct.
single-family homes. But they were to be ownership versus Phase 1 and 2, which were rental. So by that definition, I would argue that duplex implies multifamily, does it not?
Does not.
Okay.
So what I see is three different things here. One is the multifamily versus the single-family duplex, because those are different uses. The second is the number of units that you're asking for, the change in the number of units. And the third one is, it'll come to me. I don't remember.
One that I have, I don't know if it's on your mind, but I'm having trouble with the variances and special exceptions are good for 2 years. And what I noticed was you came in and that's under 674-33. You came in 2008 with a plan, and then you came in 2009 with a revised plan, which was within the time frame to make such an adjustment. This is like 24 years later on an old plan that I don't think is, I think you need a new application, that this is a new project, that what was approved 24 years ago, you didn't come in within the 2-year time frame to say, I need to make changes. I think it's,
So it sounds like you're asking, is the third phase, is the approval expired due to the timeframe between the original approval and the groundbreaking, which hasn't happened?
Yeah, I would even give them the benefit of the doubt, say 2009, because they were within that 2-year valid expiration date, so.
So this was approved as a phased development.
I'm sorry, what?
This was approved as a phased development. So
Right.
I don't think it was ever contemplated that phase 3 would be completed within 2 years. The way that the approvals worked, they did phase 1, phase 2, and are now moving to phase 3. Phase 2 was completed in 2014. So the way that this was approved as a phased development, I think that changes sort of that 2-year expiration date. But did you have more?
Well, I would just add to that work continued on through 2020 when Phase 3 was fully approved as a affordable housing for ownership project, as you know, the 20 units.
So I'm sorry, what was approved in 2020?
Phase 3.
Of a site plan for Phase 3?
Absolutely.
Okay, so,
Full
I mean, there
planning
was
board
a site
approval.
plan for Phase 3 approved back in the
Correct,
day.
as 2020. So it did not sit dormant
Okay.
for 14 years.
So you're saying there's a new site plan that was approved in
There was a
2020?
fully approved site plan. I don't know if we have, in fact, one of the drawings you have in your packet
Okay,
to give you a visual picture of what we're asking tonight is an overlay. Now, this is, that right there.
yep, I've seen the overlay, but
Right, so
yeah.
the underlay, if you will, the 20 units, not the colored portion, it forms
So what's-
part of a fully approved site plan to build those 20 homes
In 2020?
in 2020.
And that's Exhibit D?
I believe it was D. I know Mr. Sumner here had it in front of him. And
Yes, it is.
here's a board of it right here.
Which exhibit is it?
D is in David.
D.
D, thank you.
Where do I see D?
So I guess my first
D. So
thought would
it's
be,
this
this did not sit dormant for 14 years. One of the things to keep, and for those who develop affordable housing, one of the key constraints, in addition to the constraints of any significant development, is funding. And there are significantly more sources of funding available.
No,
Yep.
This is something that we're going to go into
Okay.
when we go into the
I was
meat
just
of the
gonna talk to
subject.
why we're back.
So let's go back to Exhibit D. There's no date on here, and do we have a signed site plan approved by the planning board in 2020 for this?
I'm sure there's one in the file, yes.
So this is based on a
Yes.
new site plan? Could we have that information? Because otherwise, I mean, we're questioning whether there was a time frame issue, and we don't have the...
No one was ever asked for a determination on the time frame issue. It's staff's position that the special exception and the related site plans were all vested projects. The
I
only,
appreciate that, but if there's a question, we probably would want to have
I
an
don't know if
attorney's-
anyone has raised that question to the zoning board.
We're raising the question.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And
So put that aside. So what I think you were saying was, your belief, and what I thought, was that there was a site plan approved in 2009 for this third phase, and nothing else has happened until
2020.
now.
2020, he's saying.
I know, but what I thought, and I think what
Oh,
you're
yeah,
saying
yeah,
you
yeah.
thought, is we didn't
We
recognize there
did
was...
not have any of that information, so we assumed, given what we had in our packet, that that was the loss that happened. But now you're telling us 2020, there was a site plan approved by the planning board and recorded?
I'm looking over here at our engineer. No, I don't believe it was recorded because there were conditions to it, as you might expect. And as we
Yeah,
went through the funding process and bidding process to try to build these units, I guess to be quite blunt, it simply became non-viable. It would have cost far more for the site improvements and the cost of construction than we would have been able to sell these units for on an affordable basis.
Okay, and again,
so
when we get to
therefore-
that point,
Right.
so you're saying that, but I'm just trying to understand, we're trying to understand the process.
So 2020, and this is 2023, is still past the 2-year window.
Well, the other thing I don't quite understand is if you were to get an approved site plan with conditions in 2020, were the conditions related to the ZBA process that was required? The change in units, the change from ownership to rental, and the multifamily versus the single-family
Well, no.
duplex?
No, because the approvals in 2020 would have did comply with the special exception from 2009. There were 20 units. In 2009, it was changed to 48 rental and 20 for sale. The 48 rental have been built as phases 1 and 2 and are quite successful. The 20 for sale were the approval in 2020.
They were also the approval in earlier on, were they not, or was it a different number back then?
Again, there was a shift between 2008 and 2009. It was, I want to say it was 34 and 34, shifted to 48 and 20. Building for sale affordable homes.
And again, we'll get to that
Okay.
piece, because I have a lot of questions about that. I don't dispute what you're saying, that the funding is very difficult, however you go about it, but I would need to understand more of the background than we have right now.
Could I suggest that perhaps we go forward with, their presentation and so forth, and that we get legal opinion on this time frame that maybe has expired, and open up the public hearing, let the public say what they'd like to about the project, and then continue the hearing, because
Yeah.
I also have a whole bunch of other questions, and I think there's a lot of questions we're going to have to get to the attorney in writing and answers back in writing, and
And I do think that the public should be heard tonight.
absolutely,
so.
this is the second time they've come, so it'd be nice for them to speak.
So shall we have the applicant give a presentation?
Sure.
So, and if, I don't see it so much in what you've submitted to us, but if you could also speak to the amount, to your ability at this point, the difference between multifamily and single-family duplex, difference between the number of units, which is what you're really applying for, talk about the owner versus the rental, and take it away.
All right, well, thank you. And
Chuck, do you have a question?
Could you identify yourself, please? Could you identify yourself,
yes,
please?
I'm sorry, in all that discussion, I realized I did not. So my name's Steve Dwyer. I am the project manager for Phase 3 Harriman Hill, working with Lakes Region community developers. And thank you for having us back a second time to have a look at this project. And so I think it is extremely helpful, given the long time frame, that we have a brief review of the overall Harriman Hill development. So Harriman Hill began over 15 years ago when it was originally approved as a 3-phase affordable housing development to support the need for affordable housing here in Wolfeboro. Lakes Region Community Developers has developed and constructed and manages the first 2 phases of 48 affordable rental units, 24 in Phase 1, 24 in Phase 2. Phases 1 and 2 have been very successful as high-quality, sought-after apartments. In fact, there's currently a waiting list of over 30 households seeking to rent units at Phases 1 and 2. Harriman Hill was originally approved with the 3rd phase to be affordable ownership housing at the request of the applicant in 2008 and adjusted by numbers in 2009. After investing in lot line adjustments, a market study, engineering and design work, a 20-unit single-family home site plan, was approved by the Wolfeboro Planning Board in 2020. Unfortunately, with the significant increase in construction costs over the last few years, combined with the lack of funding sources for affordable ownership housing versus rental, after 2 years of work, LRCD determined that this plan was not viable. The cost of site improvements and construction of the homes simply exceeded by a significant margin what the homes could be sold for on an affordable basis as the original intent. So LRCD is here now proposing to complete the Harriman Hill development by constructing 30 units of affordable rental housing on the Phase 3 site, in lieu of the 20 units of for purchase housing. We believe that this is in the best interest of the community, as this plan will provide 10 additional units of affordable housing, 30 versus the original 20, in a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And I think it's important, and I'd like to highlight a few key points regarding the revised site plan. Mostly what is not changing. LRCD, Lakes Region Community Developers, is proposing a plan which does not change the already approved site parameters, with the exception of the fire chief in our TRC meeting asked us to look at whether it would be possible to create a second emergency-only egress route. Other than that, there are no changes in the boundaries, as you will, of the site plan. These 30 units do not burden the sewer and water infrastructure to a greater degree than the same 60 bedrooms that would have been built in the 20-unit for-sale homes. 60 bedrooms then, 60 bedrooms now. And this plan does not change the requirement that a minimum of 50% of Harriman Hill units will be devoted to low and very low income households. The revised site plan is the same basic circular shape as the approved 20 units, with the same access via the existing Harriman Hill site. There were no significant issues raised by the TRC. There was the request by the fire chief to look at a second egress. And we've incorporated that into a plan that we'll show you. We've had 2 more weeks to work on this, so we have a slightly different picture for you. Completion of Harriman Hill 3 will provide the Wolfeboro community with 30 units of high quality and much needed affordable housing, which is why we're here tonight seeking the modification of what was agreed to in 2009. And with us here tonight, we have Stephen Hubbard, who is the Director of Real Estate with LRCD. Kevin Leonard is the Principal Engineer with North Point Engineering, and he is the lead project engineer on this development. And Megan Carrier is our project attorney here tonight. And so with that as an introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Megan to walk through more of the details of the application.
Okay, so to go back to the point we were talking about earlier, I had understood that the original special exceptions covered multifamily. If C1 is on the application, that would have been my error. It wouldn't have been a remnant of an earlier application because I didn't work on the earlier applications. But we will confirm whether multifamily was permitted on this property in that time frame rather than permitted by special exception. And if we're wrong on that and we need a new application, we would submit that. But for tonight, I'm going to present the arguments in the context of the modification. So in the context of a modification, the board's inquiry is somewhat different than it would be.
Could you slow down just a little because it's very echoey in here?
Sorry, I
That's
might be
okay.
too close now to the microphone. All right. So the board's inquiry is somewhat different than it would be for an original special exception request, just because rather than analyzing the difference between current conditions, like an undeveloped parcel, and the applicant's proposal, the board is analyzing the difference between what was previously approved and what the applicant is now proposing. So in that context, the applicant proposes 2 main changes here. The first is a change from for sale units to rental units, and the second is an increase in the number of units by 10. So as for the change to rental units, there's really nothing in the special exception criteria that recognizes a distinction between rental versus ownership units. The rental units don't have impacts which are different from ownership units in terms of the special exception criteria. In addition, we just wanted the board to be aware that the previous classification as for sale units versus rental units was something that the applicant had requested specifically. We didn't have a situation where the applicant went in asking for all rental units and the board said, no, you need to have some for sale units. That was something that the applicant proposed and the board approved it as it was presented. As to the increase from 20 to 30 units, that change will bring the total number of units for the project as a whole to 78, where the ordinance allows 136 units on the property. So we are still well under what is permissible on this parcel. In addition, while the change from 20 to 30 units might seem like a big jump, that's actually not the case. The applicant has actually kept the number of bedrooms the same, and the increase in number of units is really just a response to a demand for one-bedroom units, which hadn't been contemplated for the for sale units. So it's the same number of bedrooms, we just have some smaller units to respond to that demand. And we also did want the board to know that the applicant will be returning to the planning board for purposes of amending the site plan to reflect this proposed modification. So as part of that review process, various elements that come up for your consideration tonight will also come up for the planning board. So things like stormwater drainage and water and sewer, landscaping, lighting, all of that will be also discussed in depth with the planning board. The applicant does intend to comply with all of the applicable regulations and laws associated with those various elements and to obtain any necessary permits. But we have tried our best to provide the board with as much information as we can on all of those points because we do understand that you need to consider those points as well. So there are 6 special exception criteria laid out in Article 21 of the ordinance, and there's sort of sub-factors under each for the board's consideration. So I'd like to just walk through each one. I know nobody likes to listen to a lawyer drone on, but again, I do just want to make sure that we've addressed everything and provided you with information, so I appreciate you putting up with me. So the first criterion is site suitability, and that's whether the specific site is appropriate for the proposed use or structure. And the first factor under that criterion is adequate usable space. So for context, this total development, including phases 1 and 2, it's about 34 acres, but then has been divided into land condo lots. So there's 1 for phase 1, there's 2 for phase 2, and then land unit C has been designated for phase 3. And so that's the phase that we're talking about in the context of this modification. The remainder of the site is all conservation land. So like the for sale unit proposal, the current proposal is entirely within land area C, with the exception of one very small portion of the emergency egress lane that the fire chief has requested. If you look at the plan that Kevin just handed out to you, you can see where the road connects. It goes outside the yellow line. The yellow line is land unit C, so it does travel outside land unit C just to connect to that road. But otherwise, we have stayed fully within land area C, just as consistent with the earlier approvals. The new proposed configuration also complies with all lot coverage and setback requirements. In terms of access, which is another factor considered under the first criterion, access will be via a private road that serves the project as a whole. That road will never become a public roadway. The access was already approved in connection with the for sale units and has not been modified in connection with this proposal. And the applicant doesn't propose any changes to it now, again, with the exception of that emergency egress lane that the fire chief has requested. That lane will not be, the emergency egress lane that the fire chief requested will not be for public use. The next factor under the first criterion is the absence of environmental constraints. The proposed units are situated, again, in approximately the same location as the approved for sale units, and we believe the proposal takes into account any environmental constraints to the same extent as the original proposal. It doesn't infringe on any wetlands, and there is an existing conservation buffer, and we're not infringing on the buffer. Turning to the second criterion, which is immediate neighborhood impact, that criterion considers whether the proposal is detrimental, injurious, or offensive to abutting properties in particular or to the neighborhood in general. And the first factor under that criterion is excessive trip generation. The rental units are not expected to generate significantly more vehicular traffic than the previously approved homeowner units. The trip generation summary, we attached that as Exhibit E to our application materials. That shows 4 additional trips during weekday peak morning hours and 5 additional trips during weekday peak evening hours. So not a significant increase. Other factors under the second criterion relate to things like noise, vibration, dust, glare, heat, smoke, fumes, gas, and odors. Like the approved homeowner units, the rental units are not anticipated to generate significant amounts of any of those elements, which seem really more geared toward industrial uses. But in any event, we don't expect any change in the impact. Similarly, hours of operation, another factor under the second criterion, are not really applicable. This is a residential use that will not have hours of operation. The third criterion relates to hazards or nuisances associated with pedestrian or vehicular traffic, including the location and design of access ways and off-street parking. Access ways, again, I touched upon. Access will be via the previously approved private road with the secondary emergency egress lane requested by the fire chief. Vehicular traffic, we're not expecting the modification to generate significantly more vehicular traffic as reflected by the trip generation summary. With respect to pedestrian traffic, the applicant has proposed sidewalks to the interior of the site, linking the parking to the units, and also areas of green space that are intended to sort of avoid pedestrian traffic in the roadways. And we also feel it's worth noting in terms of pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic that phase 3 of the project is located at the end of a dead-end street, where safety concerns relating to traffic are less significant than they would be for a development on a busy road. The final factor under the third criterion is parking, and the applicant has proposed actually more parking than what is required under the ordinance. The fourth criterion relates to the availability of public services and facilities, with the first factor being sewer and water. Like the approved for sale units, the proposed units will utilize municipal water and sewer, and they'll use the lines that were installed for the first 2 phases of the project, which were previously sized to incorporate phase 3. Although the applicant proposes an increase to the total number of units, again, the total number of bedrooms remains the same, again, due to that high demand for 1-bedroom units. So we don't expect that the impact on the water and sewer system will not be consistent. We expect that it will be consistent with the previously approved proposal. Again, water and sewer will also be addressed in depth with the planning board in connection with the site plan modification. Stormwater drainage, the proposed modification from for sale units to rental units is not expected to result in stormwater drainage concerns to a greater degree than the originally approved project. But again, we will address that issue with the planning board in depth. The applicant is committed to designing and incorporating adequate and appropriate stormwater drainage. The design will include stormwater basins that are designed to ensure no increases in peak flows to downstream properties. And the applicant will also be required to obtain an alteration of terrain permit from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And in order to get that, the applicant is required to demonstrate that the project will not increase runoff. So that will be addressed in depth, both with the Planning Board and the Department of Environmental Services. We do have Kevin Leonard here who passed those plans out to you in the event there are questions about stormwater drainage. With respect to fire and police protection, again, the original proposal and the modified proposal contemplate the same number of bedrooms. So with that in mind, we don't expect more residents in the case of the rental units than what was expected in the case of the homeowner units. And in fact, in the applicant's experience, rental units tend to have lower per bedroom counts than owned homes. So we don't expect the proposed rental units to require more fire or police protection services than what was originally approved. The one change relating to fire and police protection is that the rental buildings will feature fire suppression sprinkler systems, which is not something that was contemplated for the for sale units. In terms of streets, which is the next factor for the fourth criterion, both the street layout for the for sale units and the rental units are substantially similar. The original proposal, as you can see from the plan over there, was sort of a, irregular square, and we've proposed, to the extent possible, the same kind of shape, another square. Okay, and the next factor for the fourth criterion is schools. And when considering the impact that a project will have on schools, we typically consider the number of school-age children expected to reside at the project. Again, we have the same number of bedrooms here, so normally we would expect that the proposal would tax the school system to the same degree. But again, because the modified proposal incorporates a number of 1- and 2-bedroom units, which are less frequently occupied by children, it's actually likely that the proposed modification will result in the project taxing the public school system less than the previously approved homeowner units. The fifth criterion is the appropriateness of the site plan. The first factor is the parking scheme. Again, the applicant has proposed more parking than what the ordinance requires, just in order to accommodate residents and guests. And the proposed parking does comply with all aspects of applicable town ordinances. Traffic circulation, the approved for sale units contemplated two-way traffic circulation around the irregular square. Similarly, the current proposal contemplates two-way traffic circulation around the street. In either case, that type of circulation is customary for this type of housing development and is similar to the traffic patterns that were approved for phases 1 and 2 of the project. With regard to open space, the applicant has made an effort to keep the proposed rental units within approximately the same footprint as the originally approved for sale units, so we don't believe there's any significant change to the amount of open space, but we did incorporate a large open space courtyard area in the middle of the units in order to have some open space. Fencing and screening, the applicant hasn't proposed any changes to what was previously approved for fencing and screening. With respect to landscaping, landscaping for the 4 rent units will be consistent with the site plan review regulations and will be similar to the landscaping that was performed for phases 1 and 2, which is currently maintained by professional landscapers. Commercial vehicles, whether it incorporates for sale units or for rent units, this is a residential development, so we don't expect commercial vehicles to be traveling with regularity through the project. With respect to lighting impact, the lighting plan will comply with the site plan review regulations. And immediate neighborhood integrity, the proposed rental units do not impact the integrity of the neighborhood in a manner that's different from the previously approved homeowner units. The 4 rent units don't infringe on any setbacks or wetlands or the conservation area. They'll be 2 stories. They'll be in compliance with the maximum building height set out in the ordinance. There are no streets adjoining the project to the nearby Birch Hill residential area, so the project will not create any additional traffic in that neighborhood. And the proposed rental units are consistent with the rental units at phase 1 and phase 2, so those are also affordable rental units. Again, they'll be located at the end of a private road. With respect to impact on property values, this is the 3rd phase of a well-kept, well-managed project. The first 2 phases, which also involve rental units, are complete and occupied. Phase 2 was complete in 2014, and there's no evidence to support that those phases had any negative impact on neighboring property values. We in fact, there's one property, 75 Pine Hill Road, which was listed for $375,000 in 2019 and is now listed for $630,000. So we feel that it can't be said that the previously approved and completed rental developments had any negative impact on neighboring property values, and we don't expect phase 3 to have any negative impact. The applicant also recently reviewed data respecting the impact of another of its rental unit projects, which was River's Edge in Laconia. So for that, the applicant gathered value data and sales history from the city of Laconia's assessor respecting 6 properties in the vicinity of the River's Edge apartment, and found that in all cases, the total assessed value of nearby properties increased since River's Edge opened in 2016. These findings, we feel, are consistent with the study that we referenced in our materials for this application. It was a study by Science Direct, which found that low-income housing tax credit developments have mostly positive spillover effects on surrounding property values. The final criterion requires that the proposed use or structure is consistent with the spirit of Part 1 of the ordinance and the intent of the master plan. So no aspect of the applicant's proposal conflicts with Part 1 of the town's code. And the proposal is consistent with the master plan provisions, specifically encouraging the development of affordable housing. The need for affordable housing rental units remains critically high in Wolfeboro, so those master plan provisions do remain very relevant. According to the most recent draft Lakes Region Planning Commission's housing needs assessment, there are currently 132 income restricted units in Wolfeboro, 48 of those are part of phase 1 and phase 2 of this project. 77 are senior housing at the Ledges and Christian Ridge. The proportion of renters in the Lakes region who have an affordability problem, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income to housing, has increased in the past decade at all income levels. The assessment notes that 44% of renters in the Lakes region aged 54 and under are rent burdened, and that 34% of renters aged 65 and over are rent burdened. So finally, and we believe most importantly, the study notes that Wolfeboro in particular needs 111 units of rental housing by 2040. So with this in mind, the applicant's proposal to increase the number of units from 20 to 30 while staying generally in the same footprint of the original proposal is actually beneficial to the extent that it provides 10 additional units towards what is needed. So for all of those reasons, the applicant does respectfully request that the board grant its requested modification. But I know that you have so many questions, and we're happy to answer all of them.
Yeah. I have so many questions. I haven't quite wrapped my head around them.
Could we just say for the public, what you read was the application form that we have in front of us, pretty much verbatim?
I did try to add in some additional factors here and there, but
Just so the public knows that
Just so the
we've
public
read that,
knows
we've
that-
read.
Yeah,
Got the
yeah.
information.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I borrow a yellow piece of paper? So can you tell me, does the town water and sewer flow go just by bedroom or also by how many kitchens there are? And in any case, could we get a letter from Public Works that backs up the statement that it's not going to increase the flow?
Good evening. I'm Kevin Leonard from North Point Engineering. I'm a licensed professional
Hi.
engineer in New Hampshire. Bedrooms are known to generate 150 gallons per day. That's the expected load of one bedroom on a wastewater system. And it's essentially the same load that you'd expect, basically water in, water out. So you're taking 150 gallons from the water line, and then you're draining 150 gallons to the sewer line, if that makes sense.
Right, I know the calculations for like a septic field. I'm wondering if they use the same calculations, which is only bedrooms, or, they can also add a little bit for kitchens. Is the flow going to change?
The flow is not going to change.
You state the flow is not going to change?
It's not going to change. It's 60 bedrooms.
Okay.
That's the expected load that you would have from a bedroom, 150 gallons.
So I guess what I would like is a letter from Public Works that, states that that's the fact, to go with the application.
Okay.
They must have spoken to it at the TRC meeting?
We presented the application to TRC. They had no concerns with water and sewer. We're not
Okay,
changing
so
the
it would be
bedrooms.
easy to just say there's not going to be an increase in flow. It should be fairly easy for them to write that letter.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I have some questions about, not for the engineer, about the financing. So my understanding is this original development, at least the agreement was at least 50% were going to be for low and very low income people. And the other 50% would be for moderate income or market rate?
No, it would all be affordable. Affordable housing has a variety of classifications. So yes, it would all be deemed affordable, which would use the area median income as the basis, and for families below that at different levels. So to say that 50% would be for low and very low is actually quite an aggressive position on the developer, and that commitment is not changing with this. So the entire development of what we hope to be 78 units will meet that requirement.
So that doesn't really answer my question. So 50% is for low and very low,
Correct.
and the rest of it is for workforce housing, which starts at the area median income?
Yeah.
And less?
I'm going to ask Sal. She's
Okay,
far more familiar
Thank
with
you.
this portion.
I'm Sal Stephen Hubbard. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development for Lakes Region Community Developers. The low and very low income percentage of median income is 80% of area median income is considered low income housing, and very low income is for folks at or below 50% of area median income housing. The home ownership units were going to target folks who are more moderate income.
So there's a very low at 50% of area median, a low at 80% of area median, and then there's
There's the 80 to 120% of area median income, which is what we were targeting the single-family houses to. So that was more moderate income.
So what is the area median income now? And what was the last time that was figured?
I think, and I can look it up for you very quickly when I get on my phone, but I believe it is somewhere around $65,000 in Carroll County.
Okay, that sounds pretty much like what it was 10 years ago.
So maybe it's probably higher now then, yeah. So actually we'll be with another rental phase, we'll be exceeding the 50% by a huge amount. I think we'll probably have maybe 3 or 4 units that are above the 60% area median income level. So it'll be mostly low and very low income housing.
So why, if these are not affordable to build within the parameters, would you not reach for the highest parameter to make them affordable for those median income people?
Could you repeat that question, because I'm not sure I understood it?
So you're tasked with having 50% low and very low, which means you can have 50% somewhere between 80 and 100% of median income, which is between 65,000 and 85,000.
Okay.
Right? How come you're not reaching for those people in order to be able to afford home ownership?
So we were. To be able to afford the home ownership, we were reaching for folks between 80 and 120% of area median income.
Yeah, which is between 65 and 85,000 about a year.
Right, which means we would have had to bring in the houses at somewhere below $320,000 a year in income, and they were going to cost us $450,000 a year to build.
So what kinds of houses did you get prices on? Were those single-family, 3-bedroom single-family dwellings? Were they
Yes, and they were
duplex?
very small single-family dwellings with, had no basements, slab on grade, did have a garage, and were detached.
And what about, did you look into duplex possibilities with no garage?
Our market analysis suggested that was not a good idea and not what the market wanted.
So when was that market research done?
That was done in 2019, I believe, which is when we were trying to get the project financed and built.
I remember back to, and reading the minutes, a lot of discussion about how the town, the citizens in the town generally thought that it was much healthier to have a mix of rentals and ownership, large and small, young and old. Basically, the more mixed, the better. And this development is kind of going towards a very uniform type of housing. And I would like to feel certain that all options have been, gone through in order to think that would be a better way to go. So this is why I'm asking specific questions.
Right. No, and that's fine. That's I started at LRCD. My first week on the job was the ribbon cutting for phase 1. I then developed phase 2 and tried to develop phase 3. So over the last 10 years, 12 years, I have been intimately involved in trying to get this project off the ground in the way that it was originally permitted. And we just can't do it within the resources that are available.
What is the the difficulty or the place that it doesn't work in order to build these townhouses like this, but also have them to be homeowner condos. The price to build is the same.
Correct. The price to build is actually less to build the attached housing than the detached housing, because you have fewer utility hookups. But it's really the financing available for the provision of affordable housing. The primary source that we use is something called the low-income housing tax credit, which provides about 70% of the equity needed to build a rental project. And that both drives the income qualification to 60% of area median income and below, and there is some flexibility above that, but not a whole lot. So since we try to do 70% of the total financing with equity from the low-income housing tax credit, so it's not debt, doesn't have to be paid back, it's equity. And then we raise grant funds through like CDBG funds, and we've got some other grant funds raised for this project through the CDIP tax credit program. And then the remainder, probably 10 to 15%, is debt. If we have to, and so the equation for home ownership is very, very different. There's almost no subsidy, capital subsidy, around to do subsidized home ownership.
Now,
So-
don't you think that's funny? As much as the legislature talks about first-time home buyers and supporting people, as they don't have anything to allow for that? I mean, that's just dumb. But
I won't disagree.
so all these programs that we read about first-time buyer home programs, VA loans, all these other types of loan types don't help you at all, because they're paying for the ultimate price of the finished product.
And it all is debt. It ends up all being debt on the human being that is buying the house. So yeah, the FHA program, the human being has to put down 3% instead of 20%. But then they have to pay back the rest of it, the 97%, plus they've got to pay mortgage insurance because they're only putting 3% down.
Right, and
So-
the people in this 65 to 85 can't afford a $300,000 house based on that?
We could have done it for $300,000. The houses were going to cost us $450,000 a unit, so we couldn't sell them
Yeah.
for $350,000 when they cost $450,000, and they were only going to appraise out at something under that because they were small, and because we were going to restrict the resale because of the public subsidy that we're trying to get into it. It got incredibly complex and ridiculously expensive.
Right, so one of the things that's really missing, I feel, is, we need rentals, there's no doubt about it. But then where is the step for people who want to start building equity? Right now, it's gone. There's just no opportunity for somebody.
I don't disagree. That's
I'm
why
sure
we
you don't.
really wanted to do the home. We did
Yeah.
try very, very hard to do that home ownership piece. We lost a lot of money, frankly, as an organization in trying to do it and not being able to pull it off.
Okay, I think I've beat that
I've
horse
got-
to death. But, yeah, go ahead.
Two things. It may be relevant. I don't know, too. I see in this agreement with Eastern Lakes Region, it's not close enough?
Apparently not.
Okay. I see in this agreement that you have with Eastern Lakes Region Housing Coalition that you have an option period. What is that time frame?
Currently, the option runs through August 2024. We've just extended
Okay.
it.
And then the other question, I got to write that down, I'll forget. The other question is, where did I see it? It's over here. I can't find it at the moment, but no, I'll just try to paraphrase it. It looks like that you're going to be the developers that buy the property and develop it.
Correct.
So you're just buying it from the
From
Lakes
Eastern Lakes
region,
region,
Eastern Lakes
yep.
region, and you're the developers.
Correct.
So does Eastern Lakes Region still own Phase 1 and 2, or have they sold
No.
that to you as well?
So both Phase 1 and 2 are owned by separate limited partnerships, and the general partner in those two limited partnerships is owned by Lakes Region Community Developers and Eastern Lakes. We have a corporation that we own 51% of and they own 49% of, and that's the general partner within the limited partnership that owns the developments.
And then this would go into that general partnership or be something
We would
different?
set up a third limited partnership and probably have the same structure, yes.
And then relevant to funding, I think I recall that someone of you went to the Board of Selectmen and applied for a CDB grant,
We are applying for a CDBG grant, correct,
okay? And
through the town of Wolfeboro, so, yeah.
So the town, the selectmen approved that, and they still have to apply for it?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
And so how do you make your money? Is it through developers' fees? I see that you get developers' fees.
We do. That's pretty much the only money that we pull out of projects is a developer fee that basically goes to support the next development and support our staff doing resident services and financing. And so, yeah, that's basically all the money we make.
So you do the management of the properties on a day-to-day basis, that's part of that?
We hire
Or you
a
contract it
third-party
out?
management.
And that money that you just spoke of goes for ongoing,
No.
Goes
Or-
for organizational, so
just the organization?
just the organization, yes.
And then the other thing is any of this Section 8 housing?
We may be lucky enough to get 2 or 3 project-based vouchers, but probably not.
Because it looks like that your company or firm has stated that approximately 20% of our rental units are housing through vouchers.
Some of those are project-based vouchers through what's called the 811 program. I think we have like 15 of those, and then the rest are tenant-based vouchers. So if somebody wants to rent one of our apartments and they've got a voucher, they can rent that
And
with the
then the
voucher.
last question relevant to this financial puzzle is the leases that you will be having with these rental families and people. What type of lease are they going to be? Short-term, long-term?
So these
what kind of
people
setup
sign
do
a
you have?
12-month lease and it's renewable.
They're going to be what?
12-month renewable.
12 months. Okay. I think on that aspect, I've asked my questions.
Chuck?
Nothing at the moment.
Luke?
I don't have anything at the moment. I think some of the questions are way out of our purview that have been asked. But I'd like to see us get to the criteria by which we will approve or deny this, because I think that's where the heart of the matter is. And I think how people get their funds, and whether it's a 90-10 and what they get for a profit out of a development and how they make people sign for a lease is completely irrelevant to any of this. But so I'd like to see us get to the criteria by which we would approve or deny.
So, Luke, how do you feel about the question of whether this third phase is,
To Tavis, the question of that was asked of water and sewer capacity, now, I have no problem with them to get a letter, but I believe before Dave Ford left, he was asked that question point blank, and he said he had incorporated Phase 3 of Harriman Hill and the Taylor Home project in when they went out to do the capacity for water and sewer. But I have no objection with them having to get a letter from Public Works, but I believe that has been noted in the past. That question, I think the planning board in Tavis, I mean, they must have reviewed that during their hearings. I would seem to think that it hasn't lapsed, and if it has, then I think that could be taken care of, and I think that they could still be given a conditional approval to move on if that's the only thing holding this up, other than water and sewer. But I think, like, we should discuss go through the points and discuss each little thing, and then we can figure out where we are from there.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't want to do that till after we hear from the public.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do have to say that the question of whether the site plan is still valid is an extremely technical legal question that has to be answered by our attorney in this specific situation. And
Okay.
there's lots of case law on it.
Okay.
So, and the, one other note is that we've been dealing with a conceptual plan, and I don't see that word here anymore. I see site plan. So I'm assuming this is your plan.
I was very careful on what we labeled, what we gave you, because we provided that to you several weeks ago. We are racing towards the July 11th planning board deadline, and plan to be at planning board on August 1st. We were actually conceptually at planning board last week, and that is the plan that we provided them, which was a progress print of where we're at. The plan has progressed from what we submitted to you originally and what you see there. I wouldn't call it a final plan. We're still working on drainage and whatnot, but it's closer to a final plan, yes.
So I'm kind of confused. So you're going to the planning board. Are you going to them for an amended plan, or are you applying for a new site plan for this phase?
In 2020, we approved the plan there on the right for the 20 home units. We're not building that project, so we're going to be filing a new application for a reworked version, the version you have in your hand of the Phase 3 project, which looks like what we're talking about tonight, 30 units.
Okay, so the one with the single-family homes was an approved site plan in 2020. Again, we don't have that information
It
here.
was an approved site plan in 2020. That's
Okay.
right.
Was it recorded?
No, it wasn't recorded because there were conditions associated with the plan, which we were navigating that the project was actually going to happen. We bid the project multiple years in a row. They were trying to find additional, funding sources, and the project was deemed unviable, so we didn't waste the money, so to speak, to finish it.
This is why it's so complicated, as far as, we're not lawyers, so. So I think to your question, if we were to approve this and it changed in any significant way, it would have to come back, my understanding is, to us to go through those criteria again. For instance, if the parking, on the first plan, the parking was all on one side, and now it's all on the other side. So something like that, I think, would require it to come back to us.
We're talking about, well, maybe the attorney can speak to this, but we're talking about a use and a density, I think. And we're agreeing to live within the land unit C, which is the development area for Phase 3. And so my hope is the plan that you have there is not going to change with any significance, but you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so I think the main focus for purposes of the special exception is the use and the density. So how many units do we have? Are they rental? Are they for sale units? Specifics, of course, if we change the plan in a way that, we are no longer complying with town regulations, like maybe we don't have enough parking or something like that, and we had to get a variance, obviously we would come back to this board. Or if there were some change that impacted, I guess, the special exception criteria. But for the most part, I think slight changes, like slight changes in parking would not necessarily require us to return here. But that's certainly something that we would work with Tavis and evaluate what the town wants us to do. If the town wants us to come back and be reheard, we would do that.
I'm not sure, like, who determines whether a change is, because the law just says significant. It doesn't say who decides what's significant. I don't know.
It's a case law, Schuyler versus somebody, you probably know. And it comes down to whatever is significant. I think we wouldn't know that until it goes to the planning board and then something happens. The reason that I bring it up is because on page 3 of your submittal, you have a footnote, the design is not yet final. That's why I asked you the question. Are we out of the, I believe we're out of the conceptual phase plan and into a formal plan. But it says the design is not yet final and an ultimate configuration may differ slightly from that which was depicted in Exhibit D. Well, if it's a minor change, certainly you, as one member, I can only speak for myself, I wouldn't see you change the shrubbery from here to there, that's minor, but you change the parking, you change the location of the units, stuff like that, it will have to come back. This case law that says it, so it's not Suzanne Ryan making it up.
So, yeah, and to that, I don't know about the approval in 2020, which is the one with the single-family dwellings, but was that taken all the way through the engineering for the slopes and where the drainage had to go? And, I mean, that's the kind of thing that might significantly change the project.
Yeah, we absolutely, in 2020, we had an alteration of terrain permit. We were working through a sewer connection permit. We basically got comments that we never responded back to because we weren't moving forward with the project, but we had full planning board approval, went through the TRC process, and it was approved in one meeting at the planning board.
Okay, and so this reflects, I mean, obviously, we don't see any grade lines or hills. I know it's not flat, but this drawing like just makes it look like it's all one plane. And
it's an artist rendering. It's not intended to be an engineering plan. We're talking about use and density, and frankly, when that was issued, we're still working out those details.
Okay, so there's some potential, unlikely maybe, that if there's a significant change, we'd have to go through the criteria again.
I mean, I can tell you that if that were to happen, that would be something that, I would be involved, we would evaluate it, we would work with Tavis, and we would make sure that if the town had any concerns and wanted us to come back, we'd be here.
It's just a point of discussion that may happen, just heads up.
Yeah, no, completely understood. I mean, it's in situations like this one where we're sort of simultaneously at the zoning board and the planning board, and we know that we want to make sure we're incorporating everyone's feedback. And so the reason we include that footnote in there is on the off chance the planning board requires some sort of change of us. We just want to have that out there that that's a possibility. I don't expect any significant changes, but we don't want to say that there will not be any.
So I would be, I think we can go through the process tonight, but I would be most comfortable if we could have our attorney advise us that an approval through this board was proper because of whatever approvals happened in a timely manner before. Do you?
Can that happen by consensus, or do you want a motion? I would think first we'd like to hear from the public.
Sure.
And then take care of the process after.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to add now before we get to the public? Could we, anybody would like to speak in favor of the application?
Good evening. My name's Bonnie Medico. I live in Tuftonboro, but I'm the chair of the board of directors for the Eastern Lakes Region Housing Coalition. Just to give you a little background, you've heard quite a bit about how Harriman Hill came about.
Could you just move the microphone down towards you? Yeah, thank you.
Eastern Lakes Region was incorporated, the Housing Coalition was incorporated in May of 2005, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit, just like Lakes Region Community Developers. Excuse me. As you've heard, there's 34 acres at Harriman Hill. the 48 rental units have been developed in partnership with Lakes Region and Eastern Lakes in the 2 phases. To give you a little information in regards to the development, the rental units and the people that live currently and enjoy Harriman Hill, of the 16 one-bedroom units, the apartment rental range goes from $670 a month up to $775 a month. Excuse me, the 2-bedroom apartments, the rental range is from $750 a month to $1,150 a month. And the 3-bedroom apartments, they go from $915 a month to $1,225 a month, and that includes heat and hot water. So families they're enjoying safe, secure, and affordable housing. And we thank the town for providing that opportunity and hope that we can provide more. The residents of Harriman Hill, currently, they're in the 48 units, there are 47 households. One of our apartments is in turnover process for this month. We have 27 family households, and we have 20 single-member households. We have a total of 30 children under the age of 18. We have 47 adults, 18 to 61, and we have 20 seniors living at Harriman Hill, 62 and over. We also have 2 veterans in that mix. There are 2 veterans that are enjoying living at Harriman Hill. 70% of the residents at Harriman Hill that receive income from employment are employed here in Wolfeboro, and they're employed by Huggins Hospital, the Governor Wentworth Regional School District, Brewster Academy, GI Plastic, and a number of the restaurants, stores, and other service industry organizations. Affordable housing is one of the most critical components that an employer needs to have in order to attract and retain employees. The vacancy rate for a balanced market should be around 5% of vacant rental units in comparison to in order to provide options for people that are looking for rents. The New Hampshire, excuse me, housing, the report that was referenced earlier, the New Hampshire Housing 2023 statewide housing needs assessment reports that New Hampshire's current rental vacancy is about 0.5%, which is significantly lower than the ideal 5% vacancy rate. In order for Wolfeboro to be able to attract, retain, and keep employees, keep seniors in safe and secure housing, keep children in our school district and in safe and secure housing, we do need more affordable housing. It's sad that we couldn't do the single-family homes for families to be able to start to build equity and that generational wealth that's that we all have taken for granted until the recent economic impacts that inflation, the rise in mortgage rates, and how that's impacting the ability to purchase a home. But these 30 rentals that hopefully you would be able to approve would go a long ways to providing safe and secure housing for more residents in the area. And I thank you for your time and your consideration. I also, and just one other thing, I don't know if you all received a letter of support from Huggins Hospital. If you have that, okay.
Yep.
Then I'm done, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Susan Harrington, and I'm here tonight as a representative of Brewster, where I serve as Brewster's Chief Financial Officer. And one of my main responsibilities is oversight of our operating budget, which includes our personnel budget. I work really closely with our Director of Human Resources to develop salaries, compensation packages based on competitive market rates, as well as the unique geographic housing constraints that Bonnie just talked about, specific to the Greater Lakes region and particularly in Wolfeboro. As you may know, Brewster proudly ranks as the 3rd largest employer in Wolfeboro. We have about 150 full-time employees, and we're in the fortunate position to be able to provide on-campus housing to about 70 employees, including myself. So we've been really well insulated against the current housing market here in Wolfeboro. The other 80 employees that we have not. And these are employees of our dining services team, our housekeepers, grounds crew, facilities department, fundraisers, administrative assistants, employees of our IT department, communications department, teachers, and members of the business office. As Bonnie just mentioned, the most important thing for us in hiring is being able to provide affordable housing. And we've seen an impact in hiring and retaining employees for these critical functions I just outlined as a direct result of the limited inventory of affordable housing here in Wolfeboro. We often recruit from regional independent school networks, which advertises our open positions to school professionals across the country and sometimes the globe. So we're trying to attract talent here to our wonderful town of Wolfeboro. The positions that aren't provided on campus housing, one of the first questions we get asked is, what is the median cost of a home in Wolfeboro? And when we answer $500,000 or more, the obvious next question is, how much does it cost to rent a home in Wolfeboro? There actually aren't many homes to rent in Wolfeboro, let alone affordable homes to rent in Wolfeboro. So over the course of the past several years, we've been mostly unsuccessful in finding affordable off-campus rental units in Wolfeboro. In addition to this, our workforce has an average age of about 48. We'll be retiring within the next 20 years. So those critical functions I talked about earlier will soon need to be backfilled, and those will likely be with newer members of the workforce. So for these reasons, I'd like to express Brewster's full support of the modified plans for Phase 3 of the Harriman Hill project, and I urge you members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment to approve construction of 30 affordable housing rental units. These 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units will positively impact the hiring landscape in Wolfeboro and as a result attract talent and thus boost the local economy and the lives of those residents who can't move here or who currently are here and struggle to remain in the town in which they work. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Should I come a little? I'm a little short. Good evening. My name is Carrie Duran, and I'm a resident of Wolfeboro, and I'm also a resident of Harriman Hill, the Project 2. I've had the good fortune of living there. In October will be 9 years. I'm fortunate enough to live in one of the 3-bedroom units with my twin daughters who just turned 17 and are going to be seniors now. They were in the 2nd grade, 2nd, 3rd grade when we moved in. And then my youngest daughter, who's 12, going into the 7th grade, and she experiences a disability of, developmental disability of Down syndrome. So I am here today to urge your support for Harriman Hill 3. As a resident, some of the questions that were brought up that are in the application, such as the traffic or it being a wonderful place to live, and Audrey, some of your questions as well, I am here to attest that it is a wonderful place to live. I could not be more proud to be able to raise my girls as a lower income single mother among conservation land, a beautiful path and walkway, well-maintained grounds. I'm really, really fortunate. I do not have to mow my lawn. Very lucky. Our grounds are gorgeous. As residents, we have been able to build community gardens. That started during the pandemic, and it's brought a lot of us together. I know you've had a chance to walk the property and to see how beautiful that it truly is. Also, in the wintertime, it is Hodges Development Company who takes care of managing the property, and that also goes with the plowing and maintaining that our walkways are safe. Not only for my daughter who has balance issues, but also for our senior residents, making sure the sidewalks are de-iced. You wouldn't think how often and how important that truly is, and how much all of our residents truly appreciate the care that Lakes Region community developers, Hodges, and Eastern Lakes Coalition have taken to ensure that not just the inside of our homes are beautiful and well maintained and safe and a wonderful place to live, but also that the outside is warm and inviting and the kids are playing outside. It's safe for them to ride their bikes, and we know our neighbors. We know our neighbors, and it's a very safe and comfortable place to live. I wanted to also assure you that with the new units and thinking about kids playing outside, and you're going to be talking about additional traffic, you noticed when you came to visit that the roadways are so wide, the streets are very wide, there's plenty of parking, there's most everybody who lives there maintains the 20 miles an hour that we're supposed to maintain in going through the property. But it is a place that even with the additional homes being built and they're kind of towards the back, I would feel completely confident that it's still going to be safe for my child on her bike. So I'm not concerned about that as a resident. I wanted to just also say, in full disclosure for the record, I'm also on the board of directors for Lakes Region Community Developers. I have the honor of serving as a resident. So when I first heard about the single-family homes for sale, I had really hoped to be one of those to purchase one of those single-family homes. I've been working very hard to, be able to someday be able to buy my own home. So I was very disappointed as well to not have the opportunity to do that. But understanding that the costs were so high, ultimately it wasn't going to be anything that I could afford. So as a board member, I certainly approve the new direction that we are going, and certainly agree with the last representative from Brewster who came to speak that this is going to make a huge difference to our community. And I just want to reiterate and say again just what a joy and a pleasure it is for me to live there with my family, and it's been a great place to raise them for the last decade. And if you ever have any questions from a resident perspective, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Margot Skelly. I'm a Wolfeboro native and property owner at 127 North Main Street in Wolfeboro. I was asked by Bonnie Medico, who's the chair and board of directors of Eastern Lakes Region Housing Coalition, to speak to the state of the housing market in Carroll County and specifically Wolfeboro. I've brought several statistical reports, so if anybody would like to see those after, I'm happy to share those with you. As for my qualifications to speak to these figures, I've been a licensed real estate agent in Wolfeboro for 15 years. Real estate has been my full-time profession. I began at Yankee Peddler Realtors, where I worked for 7 years and primarily facilitated in weekly summer lakefront rentals. In 2015, I began to work for Adam Dow, the Dow Realty Group at Keller Williams. The Dow Group has been the #1 sales team in the entire state of New Hampshire for the past 5 years. Since joining the team, I have personally sold 126 homes. Of those, 90% of those are in Wolfeboro, Tuftonboro, and Lower Carroll County. I have sold in Stratford and Belknap County as well. Mrs. Medico asked me specifically to speak to the statistics pertinent to the needs at hand regarding Harriman Hill. As of today, June 26, 2023, there are 176 active listed single-family homes and condominiums for sale in Carroll County. In Wolfeboro specifically, as of today, there are only 20 actively listed single-family homes and condominiums. To define actively listed, that is a property that is marketed in the multiple listing service or MLS and not currently under contract. This figure does not include any for sale by owner properties. As an aside, as of today, there are only 1,826 homes for sale in the entire state. The following figures are drawn from the New Hampshire Association of Realtors, the U.S. Census Bureau, as well as the Northern New England Real Estate Network, otherwise known as NAREN, or commonly known as MLS. According to NHAR, at the end of May of 2023, the median sales price for a single home in all of New Hampshire was $445,000. Specifically to Carroll County, that number drops slightly to $436,250. To put that number into perspective, the median price for a single-family home in Carroll County in 2019, which was only 5 years ago, was $250,000. So that's quite an increase. That shows you how much the market has changed in such a short period of time. There are several financing products available, especially to those with low-income housing, but I'd like to reference just a conventional mortgage if I could briefly. If one were to purchase a home in Carroll County at the current market rates, using $436,500 as a base price with a conventional loan, one would need 20% down to avoid PMI, that's $87,500. At the current market rate of 7.43%, again, that's a conventional loan, and a credit score between 700 and 719, their mortgage payment would be $3,007, which would include taxes and fees and homeowners insurance. However, that number does not include any HOA fees, road association fees, which are very common, as you know, in our area. And with the varying tax rate through Carroll County, this number could be higher, that monthly number. As of July of 2022, again, 2022, the U.S. Census indicated that we have 6,609 full-time residents in Wolfeboro. The median household gross income, meaning 2 working or contributing members to the household in Wolfeboro, is $66,991 annually. The single head of household median gross income in Wolfeboro is $44,107. As of today, there are 3 homes for sale under $500,000 in Wolfeboro. 3. The least expensive offering is a motel-style unit sold as a condominium at the Piping Rock Resort. That's a 1-room suite with a kitchenette, and that's currently listed for $218,900. If one were only to access 30% of their gross income toward a mortgage or rent using the figures above, this would equate to $1,563 for a double-income household or $1,102 for a single-family head of household. The remaining 70% of one's gross income would then be applied to food, utilities, clothing, medical expenses, school loan payments, childcare, and other normal household expenses. Long-term Wolfeboros are hard to find. Some are simply advertised with a for rent sign and a number to call in someone's yard, and some are marketed online. Today I was able to only track down 3 in our area. One is in Ospey, so I'll just focus the other 2 in Wolfeboro. The least expensive unit I found was a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath for $1,600 a month plus utilities on South Main Street in the old Isaac Springfield house. In my experience, $1,600 a month plus utilities is approximately the market rate for long-term rentals for a 1 or 2 bedroom, and frankly, those are very hard to come by, as they've already referenced earlier. It is therefore my opinion that the expansion proposed at Harriman Hill is necessary to accommodate our growing workforce population. Our community needs an income-based, affordable housing option in order to thrive. Thank you for your time.
Excuse me, would you happen to have a copy of that, or could you
Yes.
get a copy to us?
You got it. I have it all right here. I can
Thank
leave
you.
these. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Mary DeVries, and I am here to speak on behalf of the Wolfeboro Area Chamber of Commerce. We importantly want to commend all those involved for seeking alternatives, developing this strategy to continue to bring additional housing opportunities into the community. The demand for year-round rentals has continued since 2005, when the then newly formed Lakes Region Housing Coalition formally addressed the need in Wolfeboro and the surrounding communities. Our Chamber of Commerce continues to hear just how few rentals, and you've heard more detail and statistics already this evening, but just how few rentals are available, and the challenge local employers have in keeping the staff that is needed to provide quality service. Keeping customers satisfied encourages them to return, which is then beneficial to the entire local economy. One big change since 2005 is that, yes, today 48 rental units are available at Harriman Hill. However, as we heard earlier, there is a wait list, and it is our understanding that, for example, it can be up to 2 years to wait for the opportunity to rent a one-bedroom unit at Harriman Hill. On behalf of our Chamber of Commerce, I ask you to please respond favorably to the proposed special exception to allow for the 30 affordable rental units. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Denise Roy Palmer. I'm the former executive director with the Wentworth Economic Development Corporation, or WEDCO. I had spent 26 years working there and working directly with businesses, and I can only reiterate what Mary has already said about how difficult it is for employers to hire employees to be able to provide the services that are needed for the businesses today. That was the essence of the work I did there, and I also, over the years that I was there, I've been involved with the Eastern Lakes Region Housing Coalition since its inception. I currently sit on the board of the directors of the Eastern Lakes Region Housing Coalition, and I am the treasurer of the organization. I continue to become involved with the volunteers that are on that board, and I can tell you that it's a dedicated group of individuals. I also have a letter here that I would like to read on behalf of Edie Damaris. Do you have a copy of those letters?
We do.
That letter? Okay, all right then. She was not able to be here this evening, and I would like to, as you know, she was a leader of this initiative, and we can't say enough about her or all of the others that were involved with the Housing Coalition since its inception. To the Board of Adjustment, I am writing in support of the application of the Lakes Region Community Developers to adjust the decision for Phase 3 of Harriman Hill to provide 30 rather than 20 units for Harriman Hill Phase 3. The original goal for Harriman Hill included 20 ownership units in Phase 3. It is our hope to offer an affordable ownership option for those of modest income to our community. We are all disappointed that there was not sufficient funding for ownership construction available to make it possible. At the same time, the need for affordable rental units is still critically high here in Wolfeboro and around the state. Wolfeboro is fortunate that the Lakes Region Community Developers is willing to shift gears to increase the rental supply at Harriman Hill. While it sounds like greater impact than 30 rather than 20 units, it is not. It is a reasonable response to the need for different sized units, numbers of bedrooms for those on the waiting list, the actual total number of bedrooms that determine the demand for the public utilities is the same. The greater number of 1- and 3-bedroom units is important for single and couple households as well as for families with 2 children of different sexes or more than 2 children. It just makes sense to better meet the community needs. Harriman Hill has been acclaimed as a model development in design, management, and livability. I hope Wolfeboro will continue to support the completion of the planned neighborhood by the Lakes Region community developers as it has honored its commitment to Wolfeboro. Thank you, Edie Damaris. And on behalf of myself, I hope that you will consider approving the variance and for the Phase 3 of Harriman Hill. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen. Good evening.
Anybody else would like to speak in favor? Is there anybody who would like to speak opposed to the application?
Anybody who would just like to speak?
Anybody who would just like to speak? Doesn't look like it. Tavis, I have a question for you. I'm trying to find the denial, which I know is in this pile, but I can't find it at the moment. So you listed in your...
There is no denial for a special exception.
Sorry, what?
There is no denial for a special exception. It's not like a variance.
Well, there was a denial in our packet.
If I may, I think you're referring to, part of your process is that
Yes.
we needed to seek a building permit, be denied before coming back.
Correct.
We went through that process.
Yeah,
I got
so
it
that...
right- I got it right here.
Thank you.
Wait a minute.
So just from a clarity standpoint for the processes here, you say on the agenda, and also it was advertised for Section 175, Section 72J, the multifamily dwelling requirement to have a special exception in the village residential. So you determined that was necessary?
Actually, I anticipated board members raising the question because it wasn't specifically identified in its first hearing. So I consulted with the applicant's attorney, and to cover all the bases to get one notice out at once, we added that.
So you, as the planner, you're saying that that's a necessary special exception?
It's arguable that it is, yes, because it wasn't clear from the original approval.
Okay. So to make the paperwork clear going forward, also, so I'd like to have the application with the zoning district corrected, and the section for the special exception for the multi-housing identified in the application, and then the denial reflecting both of those sections instead of the only one that it has, right? Doesn't the denial need to speak to everything that's in the application?
If that's the position the board's taking, yes. I believe the applicant stated earlier that the same criteria would be submitted for multifamily regardless of the section you use.
Well, it is the same criteria, but the sections are different. So for documentation's sake, one needs to know what the sections are and where they came from in the paperwork.
I think it could be surmised in a very simple statement that if a special exception were to be granted, it would be granted for 175, 72J, and as listed in the application materials. I think that could be addressed with a motion. I don't think it's...
You don't think that they need to have applied for that in their application?
No.
Okay, I do.
I anticipated that.
Okay, thank you. Good job. I also, I would like to clear up the question about the site plan, where it stands, whether this process is in the right order, and whether, how it's determined whether there's any significant changes when it goes to the planning board. At what point is that looked at if it should happen? I would just like to get an opinion on that so we know what we're doing going forward. And because of that, I would like to have an opportunity to allow the applicant to clear up these paperwork items and for us to speak with our attorney before we make a decision.
Yes, do you need a motion. I would think a consensus would be adequate, that we send these questions to attorney and any other questions that any board member may have.
Yeah.
Through you.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that agreeable? Is that agreeable to
guess
do
so,
it by
yeah.
consensus rather than a motion?
Absolutely. Could we put a time frame on it?
Well, I was looking at my calendar, so we would have to, we've got that July holiday, and I'm sure the attorneys got holiday plans, so I'm not sure. Tavis, do you have a calendar there that you can be working through this?
Well, we're meeting on the 21st. That should be adequate time completely to
Right.
get those answers back at our next scheduled meeting date.
Was that a work meeting?
No, this is the one that is not happening on July 3rd.
Oh, okay.
We pushed it out 2 weeks
Okay, so.
or 3 weeks.
So then we'll have to get these questions to you
Yes.
ASAP.
So those are my questions, so if you have others, if
Well,
either
I've
of you have
been
others.
making notes.
Okay.
And so then I would make a motion, if it's okay, that we would
Continue.
continue to the 21st of July.
Is it the 21st?
I don't believe so, no, because that's a Friday.
Doesn't sound right.
It's the 24th?
Suzanne, before you make the motion, if it's okay, are there any other things that we need from the applicant or that anyone wants from the applicant in order to make on the 21st be able to?
If we do, we can
No, it's the
send
one
them,
after that.
Okay.
Meeting is set for the 17th of July.
No, our meeting's
we
going
can
to be
send
the
them
week
through
after that.
Audrey, and they will
Which
get to
is-
them.
Okay.
But I think we've covered quite a lot
Okay.
of ground.
It's the 20-something.
Does the applicant feel like they have any questions to ask the board to be clear?
Yeah, so I just want to confirm that I haven't missed anything, so I'm getting you everything that you want.
Wait a minute, they're talking
Okay.
about the date.
Sorry, what?
Apologies. I just want to make sure that I'm getting you everything that you wanted, so I wanted to go over what I have down. So I have clarification on the documentation on both the district and the sections that we're seeking the special exception under. A letter from Public Works, and I think that's all you wanted from me. Is there anything else that you wanted from the applicant that I?
There's nothing else I wanted from you but the denial letter from the building inspector based on what she's going to submit is all that I am asking for from you. Do you have specifics?
Well, no, that they address both the 175-72 and 175-27. That's the big one.
Yep.
And the site plan is the second big one.
Right. So if you could add to your narrative that does speak to that difference between the single-family and the multifamily, although it's the same criteria, you really haven't said anything specifically to those in the application.
Yeah. So I think what I'll do, if it works for you, I'll send a corrected version of the application, and then I'll include sort of a supplementation, like a supplemental narrative that addresses that
Yep.
that question. Does that work for you? Okay.
Yeah, that's best, yes.
And did you want a correction on that denial?
Well, the denial doesn't include the multifamily section, so it should have a denial for both sections that are applied for. And is the numbers right on here? Permitted 68 units, adding to proposed 30, 78 units would result. I don't quite get that.
There's 68 approved units in the whole project. They would like to add 10 more units. That makes 78.
They would like to add what?
10 more units.
Net 10 more. So you take the original 68 minus the 20 homes that were in the earlier approval, plus the 30 rentals, is
Okay.
a net 10 addition.
So that should be, okay. I'm not sure how to make that, I mean, I understand it now.
You can read that two or three different ways. It's
Right.
not clear.
But in total, Harriman Hill, as we've proposed, would go from a approved 68 total project, 3 phases, to an approved 78.
Right.
48 built, 30 in this proposal.
That's total the 3 phases. The 3 phases?
Correct.
All right, but what is C, phase 3?
30.
30. We've got 38 written on one thing and 30 on another.
No, 30 and 78.
No, on the, this one.
Oh, on here, on the memorandum, okay. Which is not part of the formal documents.
Correct.
Really. Okay.
Okay. So.
So are you
Luke's-
clear?
Luke- Yeah, so Luke's question was a good one as to,
Hang on.
oh, I'm sorry. they
I'm
have-
sorry, maybe I'm just the only one confused here. I'm still confused whether you want us to get another permit denial. And we only did this quite frankly, as a housekeeping issue.
That's
We knew
right.
it was going to be denied.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a
Okay.
housekeeping issue.
So do you want a new
corrected.
zoning decision, code officer decision here?
Yeah, we'll
Yes.
take care of that.
He'll be able to
Okay.
take care of that.
What literally happened there was they came in and asked for the denial just to substantiate it. Then we were putting it in the paper for a completely different reason. I happened to notice 17572J. I said, well, that wasn't caught before. I called Megan. She said, please put it in the notice so it would be noticed.
Right.
I did not have any anticipation that the board wouldn't be able to assimilate the answers between the two.
Okay. I just, I look at 20-year-old paperwork, and it's really difficult.
Understood.
So can we have a consensus to move forward with
So the next date is the 17th, unless you want to change the date.
we have already scheduled it for the 24th, because the 17th, somebody had a conflict. Pretty sure. No, am I wrong?
I had the 17th. That's all I know.
Well, if it isn't down, we can make
I
it
think
happen now.
I think the only person that has a conflict has already recused themselves from the,
I believe that's the case,
Right.
yes.
the only thing on the town calendar on the 17th is the zoning board. So I don't know who else would be meeting at that time.
You're right, I do have it on the 17th. Okay, so that gives us, I still think that's enough time
With
to
the
get it.
holiday?
Yeah, we can get our answers to her by the end of this week. Then that gives her a complete full week to get back to us.
Yeah, it's the July 1st week.
I'm skipping that part,
Oh, okay.
skipping
okay.
that whole week. Even after that week, there's a whole week in between.
Okay. All right, then I'd make a motion to continue the Harriman Hill case until July 17th here at the Town Hall, 7 o'clock.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Our minutes, but please, the restroom.
There are minutes.
Not doing them.
She's not doing them.
There's a whole paragraph missing.
Oh, that's right. Can we talk about, can we?
No, I
You
don't want
talk
to.
about it?
No.
The discussion about the streetlights is not narrated in the minutes. Is there a reason why the discussion about the streetlights does not have any details except for the opening and closing
The
statements?
Cook, the Cook one.
You haven't done it? Okay, so we got draft minutes and that wasn't yet included.
Cook's whole conversation was not included.
Yeah, she's got them, but in the draft, she hasn't included that part because she hasn't tweaked them up.
So we can't address them
can't, no,
tonight
that's
anyway.
right.
So my motion is to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We lost Luke.
Is your pen back?